Hello and welcome. I'm Jenny Knight from the self-directedlearner.org and joined by my colleague, Terry Brosi. Welcome, Terry.
Hi, great to be here again.
I don't know who's more excited about today's interview, whether it's Terry or me. Our guest is a prolific writer, researcher, Dr. Yong Zhao. Welcome and thank you so very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Jenny and Terry. It's great to be with you again.
And Yong, now that I have your face up, let me also say that not just a prolific writer and researcher, you are, I would say, a provocateur. You interrogate thinking, which is part of the reason that Terry and I always enjoy speaking with you. You are as well versed in global education as you are in education here in the United States. And you have traveled extensively in 3 countries, in China, the United States, and in Australia. So for such a young man, that's such an extraordinary, so many extraordinary things to accomplish. So let's begin with the idea of interrogating ideas and thinking. Terry and I have had 3 words on our mind for the whole of last year. And they are teaching, learning, education. We'd love to know if you feel that any one of them should be defined and what your views are on those 3 words.
Thank you, Jenny. You said so many nice things about me. Now I know myself better. So that's interrogating. I think that's apparently your way of sorting through things. It's wonderful to have a great conversation with you, and you two are some of the best, respected educators. I think you have a lot to share. So those 3 words, learning is probably the most important to me. That's what we do. That's what defines human beings. We learn. We constantly learn. Teaching may be necessary for learning, but is not required all the time. Education can be simply euphemism for brainwashing, but not preparing people to think critically and differently. And yeah, indeed, actually, most of schooling is used to brainwash people, to get them to become nationalistic, to hate others, to be so-called patriotic. That's against learning. Human learning should be gaining freedom, should be about liberating ourselves, should be help us become independent, critical thinkers and make good judgment. And right now, and after COVID, after the last 4 or 5 years in the US politics, well, even the politics in Australia today, and the global politics everywhere today, human beings have not learned that we are all a member of a large human race. We still go with this group, that group, this nation, that nation. This is very sad. OECD, PISA, or others in education have been focusing too much about making people economically competitive, not environmentally friendly, not humanly supportive. So I want to go back to your term, teaching, learning, education. I hope you are thinking about how do we support learning.
And Yong, you're right. That's, in fact, we've almost eliminated the term teacher and replaced it with learner. And one of the things that we're exploring is the importance of those tall learners, adult learners, to constantly find themselves in positions where they're learning, whether it's just-in-time learning or long-term learning for whatever reason. So that being said, Yong, we've not heard you speak much about training of those adult learners when it comes to their work with young learners. what are your thoughts about? I mean, should we even have something called teacher training? What should we be looking for in those people?
Well, ideally, we want human beings to become natural learners. And also, there's a strong sense in human beings, we want to build relationships. When you build good relationships with others, you can be a good teacher. Any young learner, when they trust you, when they want to interact with you, there is a great opportunity for learning. I don't know if Jenny, I forgot, have you become a grandma yet? But but Terry, you have kids. Do you remember when you were young, when kids were young, if they trust you, if they like you, they follow you all the time. They ask you all the time. Learning is seeking. Learning is you respond to them. I think we spend too much time training teachers, this and that methodology, this and that arrangement. We again forget we are human beings. Building that relationship of trust and understand with heart what every student is doing, is interested in, and where they are, and then hang out with them, play with them, interacting with them. That is very good teaching. Human beings learn on their own. They observe you. You just look around. How many times we have trained mothers? Not many, even though right now we have this habit of, oh God, you're going to have a baby, you should have mother training. Remember, we didn't, before, but many people become good mothers. That because they have a heart, there's some connection. I think right now, a lot of our teacher education or teacher training have deviated from that. We have treated teaching as a profession, as a mechanical profession. So a lot of teachers have been reduced into teacher machines or teaching machines rather than human educators.
Yong, everything you're saying resounds like into the core of my heart, and I probably speak for Jenny in saying the same thing. And it's what we believe in, and it's what we to some extent have been able to experience as adults, and also we've had the opportunity to share that with children. And with everything that we know about that and we understand and believe about that, there's still this impenetrable wall, it seems, in so many places where teachers don't have the ability to do those things because they are held to all of these standards and curriculum and objectives and test scores and all of the things that have been created in the education industry that detract and deter away from the kind of learning that you're talking about. So what is the magic formula or the magic potion that helps us to be able to shift that and move away from what is expected through the system and the industrial model of education that we're living in today?
Yeah, I think, Terry, there's something we need to recognize. First of all, there is good science we can follow, but a lot of times that science, has to be more individualized or personalized. What works for a group does not work for an individual necessarily. So I think I'm not advocating say, oh, forget about science, let's do this, let's do that. But one big thing in education is that everything we do research on in education is based on a human-made environment. So, we debate about class size, but really, does it really matter? You organize students differently for different tasks. And even students grouping, you group based on age. That's, again, against, science, all those things. So I'm actually working on a book with my dean at Kansas called Absurdities in Education. So a lot of these absurdities, a lot of them really truly absurd, but we follow them.
Yeah.
You mentioned, but I think the big thing is that I don't think there's a magic potion. You only have the morality that drives educators. I don't think systems would do big changes until the public demands the big changes. But until individuals keep up the fighting, you won't have a public movement. I mean, in the United States, I have been shocked to see the public attitudes change towards sexuality. You know, the homosexuals, you know, and a lot of, I mean, do you notice that's amazing public shift in the past 30 years. If you think about a homosexual marriage, 35 years ago, that was very tough to do. You know, that's a big public shift. Another public shift is marijuana. You know, I don't know if Florida is allowing for recreational uses or not. You're welcome to Oregon. You can try some here. But that's a big change, right? I mean, that's another huge public shift. So what I think we do, on the one hand, we keep trying to push the public opinion change against testing, against standardization, against torturing kids without any consequence. That's one area we all should do. I think you're doing the podcasting like this is doing that. But at the same time, we all have our own jobs, and you're kind of retired, but you are also working with schools, working with kids whenever possible. Implement that. I think that's the case that we do small things with few kids, few students, few people we interact with, but at the same time we do big things to change the policy. So both ends. I don't think any teacher, if they agree with you, agree with me, agree with us, they should not stop to say wait for the magic to happen. It won't happen. I have had too many people asking questions. Well, why don't they do this? I said, well, there's no they.
Yeah.
You have to be the one to do it. And the only reason to do that is morality. You're not going to be, necessarily rewarded. You're not going to be lose a job, gain a job, just to say, you think what's right.
Yong, it's great to hear you say that, because certainly in the research, leaders that go in and turn schools around, oftentimes when that leader leaves the school resorts back to some version of its lesser self. And so your point being that it has to happen from both ends. And in the case of John Davies in Florida, and Peter Hutton in Victoria, both those schools kind of reverted a bit back to the norm and became much less progressive. Very, very interesting.
It's normal that people are comfortable with normalcy, and normalcy, it comes from the term norm. Norm means the majority. That most people agree to that. So it's kind of makes sense to say that. And plus, we should understand, education keeps moving. Some are moving forward quite fast. We have a lot more educators. So what used to be pioneering will become accepted. So that's not really necessarily going back. And I think it may be a mistake to keep thinking about trying to say, okay, what's normal, what's pioneering. I think what works for the kids, that's important. At understanding a good aspiration in education makes sense. A very important lesson we learned as you were talking about COVID. We learned something really important about COVID. That is, kids can learn on their own. Mm-hmm. When they have technology, when they are connected online, they can, and they do. And we should not lose that. We should not lose that. I think for a long time, schooling has accepted the fact that children have to be taught. They don't. A lot of times teaching can interfere with learning. So we need our students to learn on their own.
So then would be the purpose of schooling moving forward be to bring together those social elements, put kids in social groups, give them opportunities to create projects, work together on projects.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the future of schooling, if we still have schools, we could call them learning communities. I think it would be very much distributed. A school can have a lot of learning communities, but the learning communities don't have to exist in schools. They can exist in some restaurants, coffee shops, streets, libraries, museums. They can, and then if they need, they can come together. I actually think, imagine the future of schooling would be very distributed. So if any big government wants to build a large, high comprehensive high schools, I would suggest them don't do that. Now you have community sports facilities. You can organize together. You can do very different things. COVID says you can learn at night as well. At night you have evening classes. You don't have to only learn in school time. So there's a lot of things. If we can, I would like to see big changes. Private schools can do this, government schools can do this, is to trust the kids as the responsible owner of learning.
You're speaking to the yes, we're speechless. Yong, two of your slides that you have shared in previous presentations that I've attended, I just firmly planted in my head. And one of those slides is of the single bar of soap that you used in China, and your point being that it was a single bar of soap that had multiple purposes.
Right.
And then you have the slide of the aisle in a drugstore or supermarket that has thousands of soap choices and soaps for specific purposes. So my takeaway from those two slides was the idea of scarcity, but scarcity, provided all those services to abundance. And I can't help but think that the one size fits all in education, which to me is almost like a scarcity. We're so worried, we can't respond to change. And you've already spoken to why that sort of aisle of choices has not hit education. Is it true globally, or is it?
Well,
Or
thank you. Yes, human beings. We can. I don't know how to judge it as morality, but it seems to be human nature to desire more choices. Whenever it's possible, they want more choices. That's at least in consumer market. That's the case, right? You look at just how the restaurants business has grown up. How many drinks, how many songs, music, how many TV shows we create every day. So that's kind of this. People want choices. But the choices have to come with resources. So in my village, you had a bar of soap. But that's the only thing. Like you did not have other resources. So when human beings get better, more time, they will consume more resources. But in education, we have this manufactured scarcity. It's manufactured. And maybe 100 years ago, 50 years ago even, it's true. You only have so many people who can teach at certain places. We manufacture that line of production. You got only like one Harvard, one Yale, one Princeton, and they're not going to expand. Harvard is not going to say, okay, we're going to take 500,000 students. They won't, but they will give you, in MOOCs, massively open online courses, but you will never be a Harvard student. But so that's how they admit. You look at how we rank universities to say, the more people you reject, the higher ranked you are. So basically, if you don't teach anybody, you'll be ranked highest. If you teach, so we have this manufactured crisis. And actually, when you are a teacher, a principal, you probably had heard that. We got to get how many of our students into this. Universities, we have more than what we need. Do you know how many universities we got? 3,000 or 4,000 in this country. And even like University of Oregon, University of Kansas, their admissions rates are over 90%. That means over 90% can get in. Why did you have this manufactured crisis? So we help scare our parents, scare our students, So they would follow this line into it. So they say, okay, yeah, we got to do this thing. You got to get SAT test scores, GPS. You got to get all this thing in. It's manufactured because we think you need that. At the same time, we have this, propaganda to say everybody needs a college degree. So then you're driving the supply and you're reducing the offer. So you have this thing, everybody goes in. But what happens? Once you go in, what you got the credential, inflation. You have this. So this is a lot. You mentioned something really complex. We have a manufactured scarcity. I was going to write a book about that, but thank you for reminding me. I forgot about this idea. Truly manufacture. Actually, you ask your students, how do you manufacture that? You rank them based on a bell curve. So, oh, you're top here. You're really not so good here. But really, if any one of your students wants to go to university, they can go to one.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you use the term manufactured scarcity, because every industry has transformed itself in the last 100 years, except for this one size fits all of education. And so if it's manufactured, wouldn't that lead you to think then it can be manufactured into abundance?
Of course. I think there are a lot of efforts to do that. But remember, there's a lot of people who have strong interest.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, real interest in the traditional format.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people. And you have, nowadays, we're talking about racial reckoning. Who is controlling the system?
Mm.
Who controls the system? Who is the ones who goes to the top? So I was thinking, I said, actually, President Barack Obama, for example, he was fooled. He was deceived to think that, all blacks can go to college and gain something like him. He never had that experience. He went to, great school in Punahou. He went to, great schools, but not every black person has that opportunity.
Mm.
How can you get that opportunity to get everybody? A lot of people benefit from the system and they are in power. So what we need is the poor people. By the way, a poor person from Miami, an immigrant, a person in downtown Houston, even if they went to college, do you think they have the same opportunity as others? Why don't we have them to go do something different? Because if you don't follow the system doesn't work. But we have all been converted into believing the system, so the system works. That has to do with everybody else to make the change. But it's, I'm only saying this too, it's very hard to make the change. It's almost impossible because, every other business can change, but education is extremely hard because you have parents, grandparents, relatives. You get textbook publishers, technology providers, the system leaders, policy leaders. You got a whole country intertwined with each other and interlocked into a system which is very hard to change.
Mm-hmm. And then you throw in there that you would be influencing their greatest treasure, their child, and they just don't want to take the risk. Yeah.
Well, most of us are not very good at looking into the future. Because we want the future to be good, but we're not good looking. We look at our kids, if your child is watching TV for more than 5 minutes, you get nervous, right? If your child did not finish the homework, you get nervous, even though homework may not matter at all. But if they don't read it, if they don't do it, you just say, oh my God, what are you going to do? If your child hangs out, during high school without going to school for a year, you say, oh my God, I'm going to die, But that school may just be perfect for the child. May just be great. Take away from that. So that's really, we need a different understanding, but we're not good at that. Understanding, we know human life. Now people live over 100 years old. You got 90 years, you got 100 years. Why the rush to memorize certain things over half a year? When you look at our schools, don't you think you were silly? Like if you were leading a primary school. If your kids are, oh, my child is half a year behind in reading. You say, What? If the kid is happy, is engaged in school, is wants to come to school, wants to hang out with, so half a year in reading, what does that mean? I'm really just that's absurdity, you know. But we pay attention. Parents compete, well, you know, for those things, especially where you come from private schools. They always said, "Oh God, what's your kid rating?" You know, and also we have this rating that has different levels of rating. You know, if kids want to read, why do you want to have different levels? They read authentic things.
No,
Very
Young, I find it very interesting that you shared about, someone who follows the traditional path of, going to a good high school, going to a good college, getting good grades, going through all the academia and coming out at the top or as a leader. And those people are the models of that system. Yet when you shine a light on someone who doesn't follow that path, who didn't maybe necessarily go to a great high school or great college, yet has become a success or very good at what they do, that's looked at as the exception. When in actuality, that is the case more often than not, but we keep going back to, but that doesn't work. You have to follow this path. So just find it interesting that we can look at two different success stories, and because one follows a path that is traditional and one follows a non-traditional path, the one that's traditional is the one that we have to kind of keep following, and just understand that the non-traditional paths are the outliers, and how can we highlight and exemplify those non-traditional paths as being absolutely legitimate, if not even more so than a traditional path. I think if we even more so start to highlight people who follow that traditional path who still haven't gotten to where they need to be or where they would like to be, and then later follow that non-traditional path and find what they want and their fulfillment in life. I think the more that we can shed light on those kinds of stories, get those stories out there to parents, to students themselves too, who are anxious about, I've got to do these things because it's what everybody else has done, it's what everybody in my family has done, or nobody in my family has done, so I need to do now. So it's just interesting that on one hand that path is celebrated and forged, and on the other hand it's no, that's not the right way to do it. It's just fascinating.
Well, I mean, I think you're right. If you look at it, the industry, the U.S. industry is really led by many dropouts. Or, I mean, they may drop out of a PhD and they may drop out of something, but they're really, drop out of college. I'm not celebrating the dropouts, but I am celebrating individuals who have dreams.
Yeah.
I remember, think about Jobs, think about Gates. At that time, they had resources, but they had more imagination.
Yes.
I don't know how many people would support what they did by deviating from their school to do their own things, And so if you look around, actually, the big thing is that I think, Terry, your point is really well taken. Is that we got to celebrate life as life goes on. People are different. I mean, my view is people are unique. People
Mhm.
are different, and everybody can turn that uniqueness into something meaningful. That's what we need to do. Something meaningful, something productive. I think, for human beings, we need that dream to say, everybody can and should have the opportunity to develop their uniqueness and translate their uniqueness into something meaningful for others. That's what a school should be.
Mm. No, that's very true. Yong, can you talk to us a little bit about some of your insights, having worked in three very different countries? Well, maybe not all three are so radically different, but working in China, working in the United States, and working in Australia, and just some of your insights and any lessons that you think would benefit each country to be thoughtful about from the others.
Well, I think there are too many, Jenny. We can start by the first thing is that, are we treating students as human beings, or do we treat them as the person to bear the curriculum standards and take the test? I mean, that's our first question. Every country, Australia, US, and China, we all have this. When students come in, are the teacher more familiar with the students or familiar with the curriculum? That's the, do you look at the child to say, what can I do to help you grow better? Versus what can I do to teach the curriculum better? You probably will find a lot more teachers spending time to say, what do I have to teach? What do I have to teach? How do I teach this? So are you worried about that? That's a really big question. I'm encouraging teachers, can you just talk to your kids? Each year I'm saying, before your semester ends, can you go teach your next year students? Spend a week with them, look at them. Don't plan for the lesson. Plan for Johnny, plan for Mary, plan for Yong, Zhao, plan for Jenny. To say, what do you need? What do you want? Who are you? I'm here for you. Can you send a message before the term ends? That's the first thing. The second thing, I think another mistake everybody has is, everybody I would say, is to say, oh, we got to get kids ready for the future. I said, how stupid can you be? There's no future without the kids. They are the future. They create the future. They do not inherit a future from us. There's no stable, predictable future waiting for your kids. They are being made. So what I worry a lot about is, what if our kids are so stupid to follow us? They're going to make it the same future. They're going to create it. We don't want that. We want the children to create a different future. Luckily, actually, one thing I have to say, I think schools, especially Australian schools, have done this very well. Environmental education. I actually am very, very happy to see a lot of the kids in Australia, and some of them in the US, are quite environmentally aware. That is good. But I don't know if that's school's job or maybe Greta Thunberg's job. So I don't know. People, change it. But it really, we want them to create a better future, to be more aware of this. I mean, the third one is really a big lesson. Is I really think it's a big mistake to teach kids too much nationalism. Nationalism is going to be bad for globalization. Australians have to love Australia. You got to do this thing. Chinese have loved China. I'm very worried about that, because we used to debate that 100 years ago, 50 years ago, but now it's more important now to say, nationalism is quite dangerous. Yeah. It is quite dangerous to think like that. Nationalism is an imagined thing. It doesn't exist, And instead of trying to invest in weapons and soldiers to kill other people, why don't we invest in food? Why don't we invest in education for everybody? And a fourth one, I think, is this government policy. They always focus on, let's invest more in teachers. I said, no, let's invest more in students. Because, like in Australia, they've had different laws. In the US, policies to say, invest in recruiting the best people into teaching, train them, and retrain them, retain them. You know how long that takes to train good teachers? But you have millions of students in your class right now, and they have access to teaching resources online. They can do that. They can do peer learning, peer teaching with others. They need people to guide them, to support them, but they don't necessarily need a teacher to teach them, to lecture on them. There are many other lessons I can talk about, but those are some of the few things, I have just happen to come to my mind right now.
Well, and actually it strikes me that they're not things that one particular country does particularly well at, except for the environmental piece you mentioned, Australia. But they're phenomenon that all three of those countries need to be more thoughtful about. And
exactly.
yeah. And Terry, unless you've got anything to add, I think that's that's a wonderful way to end this conversation. Terry, did you have anything?
I just want to say that I said I would like to have to hear something from you, Yong, that I haven't heard before, and you never disappoint. Because every time I get a chance to chat with you, I'm enlightened, and I've got a lot to think about, and you've shared some things that I have been thinking about, and you're just so good at articulating them. And just really grateful for the chance to connect again, and looking forward to doing it again soon.
Well, you know how much I love you guys, and I love your idea, self-directed learning. I think that's really going to drive the education change we need. No matter how hard it is, keep doing it. It's doing something meaningful. You know, once you reach certain age of life, once you're stuck by COVID for a year, you begin to think about legacy. What's your legacy? Your legacy is to enable, empower students to become owners of their own learning, to help teachers to make that transformation. And teaching in that context is helping. Teaching in that context is to understand individuals, and that will be a lot more creative and enjoyable. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Yong Zhao, thank you so very much. And thanks to everyone who listened to this. I'm Jenny. We're signing off, and Terry from the selfdirectedlearner.org. Bye for now.